Hello everyone, my name is Natalie and welcome to or back to my channel. So today I'm going to be speaking about 5 books that gave me all the feels. They made me feel really strong emotions, they made me feel lots of emotions, and yeah, they just kind of blew me away with how strongly they impacted me. So the first book I'm going to talk about is Bitter Greens by Kate Forsyth. Bitter Greens is a Rapunzel retelling, but it's a retelling of the original Grimm's fairy tale Rapunzel story. We see before Rapunzel is born with her parents, and we see after she is taken by the witch. Now, if you've never read the original Rapunzel tale, what actually happens in it is Rapunzel's mother, before she's born or while she's pregnant with her, looks into a sorceress's garden and sees the most beautiful, luscious Rapunzel. And Rapunzel is actually means cabbage. So she sees this gorgeous cabbage and she gets so sick, she craves this and she wants it, and the husband sneaks into the sorceress's garden and steals some Rapunzel, and as a consequence for that he agrees with the witch to give her his and his wife's firstborn child, and then the Rapunzel story we know continues on there. This is an adult retelling of Rapunzel. It shows us all the years of Rapunzel encapsulation, and like I said, it is very true to the original Rapunzel tale. It just kind of fleshed it out more and given it more depth. I absolutely loved this retelling. I actually think this is the first book I read which then led me to a retelling spiral. I gave this one like a 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely loved it and I highly recommend you read it if you're into fairy tales, if you're into retellings of fairy tales, and especially if you're into adult retellings of fairy tales. I highly recommend this one. It is very, very good. I was rooting for Rapunzel, and yeah, I don't know, I think I'd never read a retelling that had blown me away quite like this one before and shown me exactly how good a retelling could be. Because with this one it was a retelling, but it stuck very faithfully to the original time period that Rapunzel story actually happened in, and it also encapsulated all the historical knowledge we know of that time period, and it just expanded and fleshed out the original Rapunzel tale without changing anything, which I was very impressed by. Next up we have The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I listened to this on audiobook and it was both the best and worst decision of my life. I was listening to this on my commute to work when, so I read this ages ago. It was when I was still going into the office, and I would listen to it on my commute until it got to a point where I paused it and I was like, oh, I feel like something's about to happen. So I paused it, and then from then on I listened to it at home, and I'm so glad I did, because there is something that happens in this book. There are lots of things that happen. This is a very emotional driven book. It is set in World War II and it follows 2 French sisters, 2 of whom are different from each other, and both are trying to help in the war in different ways. This book takes place during the occupation of the Nazis in France, more specifically in Paris, and yeah, it follows these 2 sisters' journeys to navigate the homeland that has now been ravaged by war and now been taken over. And as I said, there are many emotional moments within this book, but there is one particular moment towards the end that just tipped me over the edge, and I sat on my bed and I had to pause the audiobook and I sobbed. I properly sobbed. I highly recommend this book. I think up until that point I'd never read a World War II historical novel before, so this was my first one, and it raised the standards. It hit very hard and I did love it. So much so that I then gave it to my nan to read physically. She also loved it, she also cried, so yeah, I highly recommend this one. It's just a wonderful, harrowing, horrendous story. Next we have a book which I loved, and the reason I love this so much is because I loved this comedian, and that is How to Be Champion by Sarah Milligan. Sarah Milligan is an English comedian. She is fantastic. I love watching her comedy stand-ups. They're always to a high level and she is fabulous. She's a top comedian in my opinion, and her autobiography spoke to me because it gave some background about the things she does speak about on stage and the stories she tells and the humour she has, but also because I think she's such a wonderful comedian, and a lot of comedians do put their life out on stage for people to laugh at. This made me feel even more drawn to her because her life experiences, you know, things that she's dealt with, her family, it's just a truly amazing read if you like this person. Again, with autobiographies, I think they're very selective because you're not going to feel as drawn if you don't already know that person or you're not interested in that person's life. I loved this and I felt so emotional purely because I like this comedian so much, and it was wonderful that she shared these stories to, you know, give some more background to her, and yeah, I loved it because I love this person. Now the next two we have, I actually have physically. I do have the Nightingale physically as well, but I'm not sure where that went. But the next one I'm going to speak about is Homegoing by Ya Gassi. This is a wonderful novel following two sisters who were separated at birth. One got to stay in Africa and the other was shipped off on a slave ship. So one sister was sold off to a slave ship. The other sister actually, pretty sure I'm remembering correctly, married an Englishman who came over to Africa and essentially invaded Africa. So this is a generational story and it follows the two sisters' bloodlines. So one of the sisters, it follows her bloodlines of her descendants who are then brought up in slavery, who are slaves, who are dealing with the freedom of slavery and the banning of it, and then who are dealing with racist America, and we follow that line. Then we follow her sister's line, and her sister's line get to stay in Africa, and we follow those stories of how they view Africa and what they're being raised to believe and their customs and how polarizing the generations are. This also speaks a lot about generational trauma and things that, even though we ourselves don't realize we're holding, if we look back at their ancestors' stories, you can see, oh, that's why they're holding this, that's why this is happening. And I loved this story so much. It's happy, it's sad, it's emotional, it makes you feel angry over the fact that this, even though this is fiction, the fact that these are actual, can be real people's stories. I mean, invasion of Africa is what happened, you know. Africa was colonized. Africa was colonized. Englishmen did come invade. They sold people, and I think that's what hits this so hard is, again, you can look at the generations with this book and you can see how things started to go wrong and right, and how things started off bad for them. It's a truly amazing read, and if you haven't read it already, then I do highly recommend you do. And the last book I'm going to talk about, which I recommend, is going to be With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is a YA novel and it follows our main character as we see her high school experience. I can't remember how old she is in this. She's 16 or 17 and she is a teenage mum. So we see her grappling with being a teenage mum and trying to go to high school and trying to be good in high school, as well as trying to start romantic relationships because she's not with the child's father, and it also shows her trying to deal with her friendships, and it also deals with her as she's trying to look at her career. One thing Emily, I think her name is, if I'm remembering correctly, does is she is an amazing chef. She knows how to put a dish together. She instinctively knows how to make things work, and I actually related to this one in ways I didn't even realise I would. When I was in high school, I studied catering and food technology, and so many things that were discussed about in this book I remember discussing in those lessons. I remember exactly feeling how she felt in those lessons, trying to cook and follow instructions, but also sometimes thinking like, oh, I don't agree with how this dish is being put together. So I didn't expect to relate so much to that because I didn't know, because she is American, I didn't know how different the teachings were going to be for that lesson. But yeah, I highly enjoyed this one, and I didn't realise how much I would relate to reading her cooking experience, and her learning to cook in high school was going to relate to my life. Another thing is, this is the first book I've ever read that dealt with a teenage mum and teenage pregnancy, and that was very important to me, and I do want to find more books that detail this information, because I actually am a result of a teenage pregnancy. My mum had me when she was 15 years old, so reading from a mum's perspective of being a teenager while raising a child was really interesting to me. Also, it's amazing to read about how much her culture, I think she's Haitian, or her family are half Haitian, and seeing how much her cooking is influenced by that culture, and also in the background things are playing out with Haiti that she's watching on TV, and she's speaking to her abuela about, and because her and her daughter live with her abuela, and her abuela has custody of her, so that's amazing. Yeah, I really liked this book. I thought it was wonderful. It gave me emotions that I didn't even know I was going to feel, and it made me, not that it's important to be able to relate to a character when you're reading a book, but I was very surprised at how much I related to it, and that kind of raised my emotions more with this story. Okay, and those are all the books I'm going to mention for today. There are so many more that have made me feel intense emotions, have made me feel really good emotions, but I will probably do another video like this again in the future. But for now, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know down below in the comments what book you have recently read that made you feel very intense emotions, or that has left a big impact on you. I would love to know. Thank you so much again for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, subscribe if you're not already, and I'll see you again later. Bye!